In a quiet town in Wyoming, Officer Noah Granger and his loyal German Shepherd Bravo are about to start a new chapter in their lives. When Noah buys an old abandoned house, he hopes it will be a peaceful retreat for him and Bravo, but little does he know the house holds dark secrets. As they explore the dilapidated building, Bravo's keen instincts uncover a hidden truth, a terrified child trapped and scarred by the horrors of his past. What will Noah discover about the boy's past, and how will Bravo's unwavering loyalty help them face the dangers lurking in the shadows? Watch this emotional journey unfold and discover what happens next. Officer Noah Granger stood at the edge of the old courthouse steps, his breath rising in white puffs in the chilly Wyoming air. Beside him, Bravo, his loyal canine partner, sat attentively, ears pricked. The winter morning was quiet, save for the low hum of voices gathered for the bank auction. Noah had no intention of buying anything extravagant, only a place to give Bravo the space he needed to run freely. The old house on Little Elk Ridge caught his attention. It was nothing special, run down, abandoned, and practically forgotten, but it was exactly what he needed. As the auctioneer began calling out bids, Noah felt a strange sense of calm. The auction was supposed to be just another duty-free day, but today it felt different. Bravo, always alert, seemed to sense something too. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd, his instincts as keen as ever, honed from years of working alongside Noah in the K-9 unit. Lot number 47, abandoned house on Little Elk Ridge. Opening bid $30, the auctioneer called. A few chuckles echoed from the crowd. The house had been sitting empty for years, and everyone knew it would take a lot of work to fix it. But to Noah, it was a perfect opportunity, a simple place for him and Bravo to enjoy. Without hesitation, he raised his hand. $30. He called out, his voice steady. The room fell silent for a moment, then the auctioneer's gavel struck. Sold to Officer Noah Granger. The crowd's murmurs faded as Noah made his way to the front to claim the keys. Bravo's tail wagged slightly, sensing Noah's satisfaction. Inside the courthouse, Noah met the seller, a wiry, jittery man named Ellis Delmare. His hands trembled slightly as he handed over the deed, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Delmare was in his 50s, wearing a stained tan overcoat and a crooked tie. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile that made Noah uneasy, though he couldn't quite place why. "Sure you want it?" Delmare asked in a low, almost whispering voice, tapping his pen nervously on the table. "The place has been empty a long time. Roof's bad, wiring worse." Noah simply nodded. "I'm not afraid of a little work," he said, trying to put the man at ease. Delmare's eyes flickered, and he smiled tight-lipped, almost knowingly. "Well, no takebacks," he muttered before quickly slipping out of the room. Noah exchanged a glance with Bravo. The dog's growl was low, barely a whisper, but it carried a warning. "Your mutt doesn't like me," Delmare had said, a slight edge in his voice. Noah leaned down to Bravo. "What do you think, buddy?" he asked, but Bravo only tilted his head slightly, his amber eyes still watching the man's retreating figure. The deal was done, but Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Delmare's strange behavior lingered in his thoughts as he walked toward the door. Bravo's growl, the nervous energy surrounding the man, it all seemed to suggest more than just a bad roof and worse wiring. Noah shook it off and led Bravo to the patrol SUV. It was time to head to the house. As Noah and Bravo drove up the winding roads through the snow-covered land, the quiet landscape of Little Elk Ridge unfolded before them. The house stood at the end of a narrow gravel path, its faded siding and crooked porch giving off a sense of neglect. Despite the obvious signs of decay, Noah felt something calling him to this place. Bravo jumped out first, sniffing the air with intensity. "Let's see what we've got here, boy," Noah said, grabbing the keys from the tin can under the front step, just like Delmare had told him. As the door creaked open, Noah was greeted by an eerie silence that felt heavier than the cold wind outside. Inside, the smell of dust and old wood lingered in the air, and faded curtains drooped like wilted flowers. It was clear the house had been left to rot, yet Noah could feel a strange pull. Something about this place was more than just old and abandoned. Then out of the corner of his eye, Noah caught a flash of movement. A shadow slipped into view, and Bravo's growl turned deeper, more insistent. Noah's heart rate picked up. "Easy, Bravo," he whispered, hand resting on the flashlight. The growl from Bravo echoed in the silence louder now, and Noah's instincts kicked in. He followed the dog up the stairs, a sense of unease creeping up his spine. Bravo's body was tense as they neared the second floor. Something wasn't right. Noah's footsteps were careful as he approached a room at the end of the hallway. Bravo was already there, his nose pressed to the door, his body rigid. Noah reached for the doorknob, then paused. Something in the air felt thick, like they were about to uncover something they weren't meant to find. He pushed the door open. And there in the shadows of the room crouched a boy, a small, frightened figure barely able to lift his head. The boy's hollow eyes met Noah's, and for a moment everything else in the world seemed to disappear. "Please don't make me go back to him," the boy whispered, his voice shaking with fear. Noah and Bravo stepped inside the house, their footsteps echoing on the creaky floorboards. The air was stale, filled with the musty scent of years of neglect. Faded curtains hung limply at the windows, and the furniture covered in white sheets stood like forgotten relics of a time long past. Despite the silence, something felt off, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Bravo trotted ahead, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air, his senses on high alert. The dog's ears flicked back as he moved through the hallway, his body tense. Noah noticed the change in his partner. Bravo's usual calm demeanor was replaced by a low rumbling growl, a warning. The dog had sensed something. Noah's instincts kicked in. He paused, watching Bravo, whose tail was stiff as he sniffed along the floor. Something about the way the dog was acting told him they weren't alone, not in the way he expected. "What is it, boy?" Noah whispered, but Bravo didn't answer. He just kept moving. As they made their way up the narrow staircase, the old wood creaked under their weight. The dim light from the hallway barely illuminated the steps, casting long shadows against the walls. With each step, Noah could feel a growing tension, as though the house was holding onto a secret and they were about to uncover it. Bravo stopped at the top of the stairs, his nose pointed toward the end of the hallway. The air was thick with silence, and Noah could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Bravo's growl grew louder, more intense. Noah felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Easy, Bravo." Noah muttered, his hand resting on the flashlight at his side. The dog was alert, his body tense, as he moved cautiously toward a door at the far end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, just enough to let a sliver of light spill through the crack. Bravo stopped just in front of the door, his nose pressed to the gap. His growl was soft but steady, a low warning that something wasn't right. Noah approached slowly, his heart beating a little faster now. The house felt colder at this moment, as though it was holding its breath. Noah reached out and pushed the door open. The hinges creaked in protest, and a sudden chill swept through the room. Inside, in the dim light, Noah's eyes immediately locked onto the small, huddled figure in the far corner. A boy, no older than 8, was crouched in the shadows, his arms wrapped around his knees and his eyes wide with fear. The boy's gaze met Noah's, and for a brief moment, everything else in the world seemed to fade away. The boy's hollow eyes, full of fear, stared back at him, and Noah's heart clenched. He could feel the weight of the boy's terror and emotion so raw it seemed to hang in the air. "Please don't make me go back to him," the boy whispered, his voice trembling with fear. Noah's chest tightened as he stepped forward, his voice soft and reassuring. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you," Noah said gently, kneeling down to the boy's level. His hand reached out slowly, trying to offer comfort. The boy didn't move, but his eyes never left Noah, wary and uncertain. Bravo, sensing the boy's fear, approached slowly, his tail tucked between his legs. The dog lowered himself to the floor, his body language calm as though trying to communicate safety. He whined softly and nudged the boy's leg with his nose. The boy flinched at first, but then slowly reached out his small hand, brushing against Bravo's fur. For a moment, The fear in his eyes seemed to fade as the dog's presence offered him some comfort. It was the first sign of trust Noah had seen from the boy. "What's your name, kid?" Noah asked softly, his voice steady. The boy hesitated before answering, barely above a whisper. "Eli," the boy said, his voice shaky. Noah's mind raced. Eli. The name echoed in his thoughts, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. There were more pressing questions to ask. He knelt down further, trying to keep his voice calm. "Eli, it's okay. You're safe now," Noah said. "You don't have to go back to him. No one is going to hurt you." Eli's eyes flickered with something Noah couldn't quite place. Relief, perhaps mixed with uncertainty. It was clear that this child had been through something terrible, something that had left him scarred, but Noah was determined to help him, to offer him the safety and peace he so desperately needed. Bravo lay down beside Eli, his head resting on the boy's lap as if to say, "You're not alone anymore." Noah's gaze softened as he stood up. The weight of what Eli had said and the fear in his eyes made Noah realize the depth of the danger the boy had been living in. The mention of a man, the same man who had sold him the house, sent a chill down Noah's spine. But for now, Noah pushed those thoughts aside. His priority was clear. "Let's get you something to eat," Noah said, offering a small smile. He stood and motioned for the boy to follow him. "You're safe here." As Eli slowly stood up, still unsure, Noah's mind kept racing. This was just the beginning. There was a mystery here, a story that needed to be uncovered, and Noah was determined to see it through. Noah led Eli to the small kitchen area where the faint scent of dust still lingered in the air. He pulled open a cupboard and retrieved a couple of granola bars and a bottle of water, handing them to the boy. Eli took them with trembling hands, still unsure of the kindness being offered. As the boy took a small bite of the granola, Noah sat across from him, his gaze soft but filled with concern. Eli ate in silence for a moment before he set the granola bar down, his eyes meeting Noah's. I've been running for a long time," Eli whispered, his voice still raw from fear. "From him." His gaze dropped to the floor, and for a moment it seemed like the weight of his past was too much for him to bear. But then Eli took a deep breath and slowly pulled something from his backpack, a small weathered envelope. He opened it cautiously, revealing an old photograph and a torn document. The photograph showed a woman with dark curly hair smiling gently as she held a young Eli in her arms. Her face was familiar, but the sadness in her eyes was impossible to miss. "This is my mom," Amanda, Eli said, his voice faltering. She was kind. She always made me laugh even when things were bad." Noah reached forward gently, taking the photo. The woman in the picture was beautiful, and her love for Eli was evident in the way she held him. But there was more to this story than just a mother and son, something dark, something dangerous. Eli continued, his voice trembling with emotion. "This," he said, holding up the birth certificate, "is the only thing I have left of her, but I don't even know why I'm showing you this." Noah looked at the certificate, his eyes catching the name crossed out, Amanda's name. Underneath the name of Eli's father, Ellis Delmarie, was clearly printed. The blood in Noah's veins seemed to freeze. Ellis Delmarie, the man who had sold him the house. A sickening realization began to form in Noah's mind. "Eli," Noah said softly, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him, "what happened to your mom?" Eli's gaze dropped again, his fingers clenched around the edges of the photograph. "He killed her," Eli whispered. "I saw it." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. Noah's heart dropped. The boy's voice was quiet, but there was a cold, hard truth to it that Noah couldn't ignore. The realization that Delmarie had murdered his own wife and that Eli had witnessed it sent a chill down Noah's spine. Eli continued, his voice breaking as he recounted the events. "I was hiding upstairs. I heard them fighting. Mom, she didn't want him to do it anymore. She didn't want him to take the money, and he got angry. Really angry. He pushed her." Eli's eyes filled with tears, but he wiped them away quickly like he was used to holding everything inside. "I didn't know what to do. I thought she'd be okay. But then she didn't move." Noah felt a lump form in his throat. This boy had seen things no child should ever witness. The brutality of it, Ellis Delmare's cruelty, was unimaginable. But the worst part was that Eli had been forced to run, forced to hide, forced to live, in fear of the man who should have protected him. Eli's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible. I ran away that night. I didn't want him to hurt me too. So I stayed in the woods for a while, then in an old camper near the lake. But it got too cold, and when I saw him come back here, I thought maybe I could find something to prove he did it. Noah's mind raced. Everything was becoming clear. Delmare wasn't just a cruel man, he was a murderer, and now Eli was the only one who could expose him. As Noah sat there trying to process what he had just learned, Bravo, who had been quietly lying at Eli's feet, suddenly lifted his head and nudged the boy's leg. Eli looked down at the dog, his face softening slightly. I guess you've been protecting me too, huh? He said with a faint smile, rubbing Bravo's ears. Bravo's tail thumped softly against the floor. The bond between the boy and the dog was growing stronger, and Noah couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for his canine partner. Bravo had already proven his loyalty countless times before, but now it seemed like the dog had become Eli's silent protector, an unwavering presence in a world that had torn Eli apart. Noah knew there was no going back now. The truth was out, and Delmare's fate was sealed. But Eli's journey was far from over. Noah was going to make sure that Eli would never have to live in fear again. Don't worry, Eli. Noah said, his voice firm with conviction. You're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out together. Eli sat in the small kitchen, his fingers still clutching the worn photograph of his mother. His voice was soft but steady as he spoke, recounting the details of his past, the things that had shaped him, the pain he had tried to bury for so long. It wasn't always like this. Eli began looking at the picture of his mother in his hands. She was kind, loving. She made everything seem normal, even when everything around us wasn't. But my dad, he was never like her, not even close. His words hung in the air like a weight too heavy for any child to bear. Noah leaned forward, his heart aching for the boy sitting across from him. Eli's story wasn't just one of survival. It was a story of witnessing the worst of human nature, and yet somehow the boy was still here, still fighting, still hoping. Eli's voice wavered slightly as he continued. It started when I was really little. I don't remember much from before, but I remember the fights, his yelling. My mom would try to calm him down, but it never worked. Every night he'd go out, and when he came back, he'd bring something with him. Anger, or maybe just disappointment. I don't know. But it always ended the same way. Eli paused, his eyes growing distant as he recalled the darkness of those moments. One night, I saw it. He was yelling at her again about money, about something else. She said she didn't want the insurance money anymore. She wanted to leave. She was done with him, but he wasn't done with her. Eli's voice broke as he spoke the next words. He pushed her. I saw it. She fell, and I didn't know what to do. I thought she'd get up like always, but she didn't. She just stayed there. The pain in Eli's words was undeniable, and Noah's chest tightened. This was a child who had seen too much, felt too much, and yet here he was sharing the truth with Noah, the man who was now his protector. I ran that night, Eli continued, his eyes welling up with unshed tears. I ran and hid. I thought maybe if I stayed hidden, maybe I'd be safe. I didn't want to go back to him. So I stayed in the woods in an old camper by the lake. But the cold, it got too much. He wiped his eyes as if trying to erase the memories that still haunted him. When I heard him talking about selling the house, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could find something that would show the truth. Noah sat quietly, absorbing Eli's words. He could feel the weight of the boy's suffering, the depth of the trauma Eli had experienced. And yet, in the midst of all the pain, Eli had managed to survive. He was strong, stronger than Noah could have ever imagined. Bravo, who had been quietly lying by Eli's side, suddenly shifted closer to the boy. The dog's presence was soothing, almost like a silent promise that Eli would never have to face this alone again. Eli, still shaken by the memories, looked down at Bravo. The dog's amber eyes met his warm and full of understanding. Slowly, Eli's trembling hand reached down to pet Bravo, and for the first time a genuine smile appeared on the boy's face. "Thanks, buddy." Eli whispered the words soft but full of gratitude. Bravo's tail thumped gently against the floor as if acknowledging the boy's thanks. Eli didn't know it yet, but this dog, this German shepherd, had already become his greatest protector. Bravo was there not just as a companion, but as a symbol of safety, a reminder that Eli no longer had to be alone in the world. Noah watched the bond between Eli and Bravo grow stronger with every passing moment. It was clear that the dog had already sensed the boy's pain, and in his quiet, unwavering way, Bravo had offered the comfort Eli needed most. Noah's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and determination. He wasn't just taking Eli in out of a sense of duty anymore. He was doing it because the boy deserved better, a future free from fear, filled with hope, and surrounded by the loyalty that only a dog like Bravo could provide. "Eli," Noah said gently, "I promise you, you don't have to go back to him. We'll figure this out together." Eli nodded, his hand still resting on Bravo's fur. For the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope, something he hadn't felt in years. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of the old house, casting a soft glow over the abandoned rooms. The air still smelled of age and neglect, but now it carried something else: purpose. Noah stood in the living room, his eyes scanning the space as Bravo lay calmly at his feet. The house, once a place of fear and secrecy, was now the starting point of an investigation that could change everything for Eli. Noah's mind raced. He needed answers. Answers about Delmare, about what had happened in this house, and most importantly about what had happened to Eli's mother. The boy's quiet voice still echoed in his ears. He killed her. Noah couldn't shake that thought. There had to be more to the story. He wasn't just dealing with a domestic dispute gone wrong. There was something darker hidden in this house, something that Delmare had worked hard to cover up. "Let's see what we can find, Bravo." Noah murmured, his voice steady but filled with determination. With a small approving wag of his tail, Bravo rose to his feet and followed Noah as he moved through the house. The dog's keen nose led the way, sniffing every corner, every crack in the walls, as if he could sense the secrets buried within the house's foundation. Noah moved cautiously, his flashlight cutting through the dimness, scanning the walls for any sign of hidden compartments or overlooked clues. The house was full of remnants from its past life. Faded photographs still hung crookedly on the walls, and yellowed newspapers were scattered across the floor. But Noah wasn't interested in the house's history. He was looking for something more, something that would explain Delmare's actions. After searching the main floor and the upstairs bedrooms, Noah's attention was drawn to the small, neglected study at the back of the house. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a dusty desk cluttered with old papers and files. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. This was where Delmare had been hiding something. He could feel it in his gut. Noah moved to the desk and started sifting through the papers. Most of it was junk, old bills, overdue notices, some old bank statements. But then he stopped. One piece of paper caught his eye. It was a life insurance policy, but it wasn't just any policy. It was heavily marked with several sections underlined in red. A note attached read, "Final claim, pending investigation." Noah's heart skipped a beat as he read through it. The name on the policy was familiar. Amanda Collins, Eli's mother. The amount was significant, the kind of payout that would be life-changing. But there was something off about it, something that didn't sit right. Noah dug deeper into the pile, and as he shuffled through more documents, he found more insurance papers, more claims, all filed under different aliases. Some names were unfamiliar, but Amanda's stood out again and again. It was like Delmare's had been involved in a pattern, a scheme. These weren't just life insurance policies, they were part of something much bigger. Bravo let out a low growl from the corner of the room, as if sensing the rising tension. Noah stood frozen for a moment, the weight of what he had just uncovered sinking in. Delmare had been running some sort of fraud operation, and Amanda's death had been part of it. But what about Eli? Why had Delmare been so intent on silencing his own son? Noah's thoughts were interrupted by a loud thud from above. Bravo's ears perked up, and Noah quickly moved toward the stairs, his hand instinctively reaching for his gun. But as he reached the foot of the staircase, Bravo's growl shifted from a warning to a deep, almost ominous sound. The dog's body was tense, ready to spring into action. Noah hesitated, his hand still gripping the railing. He had uncovered something that could bring Delmare down, but now there was something else. Something that had shifted the house's atmosphere. He wasn't alone in his search anymore. "Stay close," Bravo Noah whispered as they cautiously made their way up the stairs. Whatever was hidden in this house was more than just paper. It was a dark, secret one that might put them all in danger. Noah and Bravo crept up the narrow staircase, the tension in the air thickening with every step they took. The house, which had seemed like just another abandoned property, was quickly becoming something more, something dangerous. Each creak of the floorboards beneath them echoed through the silence, and Bravo's growls grew louder, more insistent. The dog's instincts were sharp, and Noah trusted him with his life. At the top of the stairs, Noah paused for a moment, scanning the hallway. The dim light from the window at the far end of the hall flickered, casting long shadows. The house seemed to breathe heavy and cold, as if it was alive, holding on to something it didn't want to reveal. Bravo's nose twitched. As he sniffed the air, his body still tense. He slowly moved toward the end of the hallway, his ears pinned back, his movements deliberate. Noah followed, his hands still on his gun, his senses heightened. There in the corner of the hallway, behind a stack of old decaying boxes, Noah spotted something. It was a small drawer, half hidden beneath a sheet of old fabric. He knelt down, pulling the drawer open. Inside, Noah found a pile of old photographs, yellowed with age, and a stack of papers. More insurance forms, more claims, all bearing the name Ellis Delmare. Some were signed with different names, all with similar claims. It wasn't just fraud. It was an elaborate scheme, one that spanned years. Among the papers, one photo stood out, Amanda. In it, she looked much younger, smiling with her arm around a man who was clearly Delmare, but there was something unsettling about the way he stood next to her. His posture was too rigid, his eyes too cold. The photograph spoke of a marriage that wasn't built on love, but on control. A marriage that had slowly, methodically destroyed the woman in it. Noah's heart sank as he continued to go through the photos and papers. Delmare had been living a lie for years, forging documents, manipulating insurance policies, and using his family as pawns in his twisted game for money. Amanda had tried to escape to protect her son, but Delmare's hold on her was unrelenting. Noah could almost hear the echoes of their arguments, see the conflict in the woman's eyes in the photographs. The last photo in the stack was a more recent one, a grainy image of Delmare standing next to a barn, looking over his shoulder. The photo was marked with a date, March 17, 1984, just days before Amanda's death. The timestamp sent a chill through Noah's spine. This was no coincidence. Delmare had been planning something, and Amanda had found out. The question was, had she known too much? Was that why she had to die? As Noah stood up, his thoughts swirling, he was suddenly jolted by a noise behind him. Bravo's growl intensified, a deep, menacing sound that sent a shiver down his spine. Noah spun around, hand on his gun. There at the top of the stairs stood Ellis Delmare. The man's face was pale, his eyes wild with a mix of desperation and fury. His clothes were disheveled, and the scent of alcohol hung thick around him. But it wasn't the state of his appearance that caused Noah's pulse to race. It was the way he was holding himself like a cornered animal ready to strike. "You think you can just come in here and dig up my past?" Delmare's voice was low, cold, his words laced with venom. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Granger." Noah's grip tightened on his gun, but he didn't raise it yet. "You're not going to get away with this, Delmare," he said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "I've got the proof. It's over." Delmare's lips curled into a twisted smile. "You don't know how deep this goes. You don't know what I've done to protect myself." He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Noah's. "You think this is a game? You think you're going to stop me?" Bravo stepped forward. His body braced in front of Noah, his hackles raised, a low growl escaping his throat. The dog's protective stance was clear. He wasn't going to let Delmare get any closer. Delmare paused, eyeing Bravo with a mixture of disdain and fear. "You think a dog's going to protect you?" Delmare sneered. "You're a fool, Granger." Noah's jaw clenched. This wasn't just about a house or a fraud scheme. This was personal. Delmare was a dangerous man, and Noah could feel the weight of it settling in his chest. But he couldn't back down now. Not when Eli's life was at stake. "I'm not backing down, Delmare," Noah said, his voice unwavering. "This ends today." Delmare took a step back, his expression shifting from fury to something darker, something Noah couldn't quite place. "We'll see about that," Delmare muttered, turning and quickly retreating down the stairs. "We'll see who wins in the end." Noah didn't move, his gaze locked on the doorway where Delmare had disappeared. The man was gone for now, but Noah knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. Noah stood still, his eyes locked on the doorway where Delmare had vanished moments before. The tension in the air was thick, heavy, and he could feel it pressing against his chest, suffocating him with each breath. Delmare was dangerous. No longer just a man involved in a fraud scheme. He was a predator, and Noah had just made himself a target. "Stay close, Eli," Noah said quietly, his voice sharp with authority. Eli, who had been silently watching from the stairs, took a step back, his face pale. The boy's wide eyes were filled with fear as he watched the door, expecting Delmare's return at any moment. "I don't want to see him," Eli whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't want to go back." Noah turned to the boy, his heart breaking at the sight of the fear in Eli's eyes. The child was barely 8, yet the trauma he had lived through had aged him beyond his years. But Noah wouldn't let him suffer any longer. Not while he was here. "You're not going back to him, Eli." Noah assured, his voice firm. "He can't hurt you anymore." But even as Noah spoke those words, he knew they weren't enough. Delmare was a threat that couldn't be ignored. Noah had to act fast, and he had to protect Eli, no matter the cost. A few moments later, as if summoned by Noah's thoughts, Delmare appeared in the doorway again. His eyes were narrowed, his face contorted with anger and desperation. He stepped forward, his movements slow but purposeful, like a man who knew he was about to lose everything. "I told you," Granger, Delmare spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You've made a mistake. You have no idea what you're getting into. This house, this whole situation, it's mine. And you're just a fool standing in my way." Noah's jaw tightened as Delmare moved closer. The man was trying to intimidate him, but Noah wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. "I'm not afraid of you," Noah said, his voice cold and steady. "And I won't let you hurt him again. You're done here, Delmare." Eli, who had been standing in the shadows, finally spoke. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of everything he had been through. "Please, don't hurt him. Don't hurt anyone." Noah glanced over at the boy, his heart breaking once more at the raw emotion in Eli's eyes. Eli wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a child who had endured too much and was now finding his voice. He was stronger than Noah had given him credit for, but still fragile. Delmare's expression darkened as he turned to Eli, his eyes flashing with malice. "You think you're safe now? You think this ends with me just walking away? You're wrong. This is just the beginning." With those words, Delmare reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, gleaming knife. The blade caught the light as he brandished it, his face twisted with fury. "You really think a dog and a cop can stop me?" Delmare sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're nothing." Noah didn't hesitate. His hand went to his gun, but Bravo was already ahead of him. The German shepherd growled low, his body tense and ready to spring into action. "Bravo, stay." Noah commanded, his eyes fixed on Delmare, but his voice held a warning. The dog held its ground, watching intently, muscles coiled like a spring. But Delmare didn't care. In a flash, he lunged toward Noah, the knife gleaming in the dim light. Eli screamed, but before the man could get close enough to strike, Bravo sprang into action. With a ferocious bark, the dog launched himself at Delmare, sinking his teeth into the man's arm. Delmare staggered back, howling in pain, and the knife fell from his hand, clattering to the floor. Bravo didn't release his grip, his teeth digging in as the man struggled. Noah rushed forward, grabbing Delmare by the collar and forcing him to the ground. his gun aimed at the man's chest. "It's over," Noah said, his voice cold as ice. "You're done." Delmare, panting and bleeding from the wound in his arm, tried to push Noah away, but Bravo kept him pinned down, growling low and menacingly. The dog wasn't letting go. "You'll regret this," Delmare hissed, his eyes wild. "You'll both regret this." Noah's grip tightened on Delmare, his heart pounding. He was close to ending this, close to making sure Delmare could never hurt Eli again. Noah's grip on Delmare was unyielding, but even as Bravo's teeth held fast, the man's desperation only grew. His body twitched with the force of his struggle, and his wild eyes darted between Noah and Eli, who stood frozen in the corner, fear etched across his young face. The boy had never seen his father like this, and the terror was evident in the way his hands trembled, the way he pressed his back against the wall, unsure of what to do next. Noah could feel the tension building, Delmare's anger, his fear, the way the air seemed to crackle with the weight of the moment. The man was cornered, but he was far from giving up. The knife had fallen, but Noah knew that Delmare wasn't finished. He was dangerous, and now with his back against the wall, he had nothing to lose. "You think you've won?" "Granger." Delmare spat, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "You think you can stop me with a dog and a gun?" He twisted beneath Noah's grip, trying to break free, but Bravo's jaws were locked firmly on his arm, and the dog wasn't letting go. The more Delmare struggled, the more Bravo dug in, the growl in his chest, a low rumble of warning. Noah's gun stayed steady, aimed at Delmare's chest. "It's over." Noah repeated, his voice calm but resolute. "You're done." But Delmare wasn't listening. His eyes gleamed with a dark, almost frantic resolve. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he hissed. "I've buried secrets you'll never find. I'm untouchable." The words were like a spark in dry tinder, lighting a fire that would burn through the room. Delmare's chest heaved as he lurched forward, using all his remaining strength to try and shove Noah off. "You don't understand. I'll make you regret this." Before Noah could react, Delmare moved with surprising speed. His arm shot out toward Eli, his hand aiming for the boy with the intent to grab him, to drag him back into his control. The man's desperation was palpable. He wasn't just fighting to free himself. He was fighting to reclaim what he thought was his, even if it meant hurting his own son. "Eli, move!" Noah shouted, his voice tight with panic. But Eli was frozen. The sight of his father's fury, the man who had tormented him for years, was more than he could handle. His legs were stiff, his body rooted to the spot by the overwhelming fear that had shaped his young life. Bravo, sensing the danger to Eli, reacted instantly. With a snarl, the German shepherd lunged forward, his powerful body slamming into Delmare's side. The force of the impact sent Delmare crashing to the ground, but Bravo wasn't finished. The dog's teeth sank into Delmare's jacket, pulling him away from Eli and onto the floor with a brutal force. Delmare yelped, struggling beneath Bravo's weight, but the dog wouldn't let up. Noah didn't hesitate. He moved swiftly, grabbing Delmare's arms and pulling them behind his back, forcing the man to the floor. Bravo stepped back, growling, his teeth bared, as he waited for Noah's next move. Delmare's struggles were becoming weaker, his body pressing against the cold, unforgiving floor. "You'll never get away with this." Delmare spat, his voice now strained with pain. "You think this ends here? You'll regret it." But Noah's expression remained firm, unshaken. "No, Delmare," he said, his voice low and unwavering. "You've done enough damage, and now you're going to pay for it." As Noah tightened his hold, Delmare's struggles became more erratic, his body slipping in the cold sweat of fear and fury. It was clear that he still believed he could escape, could somehow regain control. But the truth was, he was defeated. His reign of terror was over. Noah glanced at Eli, still standing in the corner, his eyes wide and filled with a mixture of fear and awe. The boy had been through so much, and now, for the first time in what felt like forever, he was seeing the end of the nightmare that had haunted him. "Eli," Noah said, his voice softening, "you're safe now." But even as Noah said the words, a creeping sense of unease settled over him. Delmare wasn't going down easily, his threats weren't over, and Noah knew the danger wasn't gone yet. There was more to this story, more to uncover. Delmare had already proven he would do anything to keep his secrets hidden, and that meant Noah couldn't afford to let his guard down. Noah's grip on Delmare remained firm, but the man's erratic movements and strained breathing were now the least of his concerns. His focus shifted momentarily to Eli, who was still frozen in the corner, his wide eyes locked on the chaos unfolding before him. The boy had been through too much, seen too much, and Noah knew the terror wasn't over for him yet. But as he prepared to move, something in the air shifted. There was a sudden, almost imperceptible shift in the tension of the room, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Noah's instincts flared, and his gaze immediately darted to Delmare's face. The man's wild, frantic eyes seemed to glimmer with a darker intent, and for a split second Noah felt it, the unmistakable sense of danger. "You think you've won?" Delmare hissed, his breath ragged as he twisted beneath Noah's hold. "You haven't even scratched the surface. I've made sure you'll never leave this house." Noah's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about, Delmare?" he growled, but before he could react further, a loud, deep click echoed through the room. It was almost inaudible, but Noah caught it, the sound of a mechanism being triggered. In the instant that followed, the world erupted into chaos. The floor beneath them seemed to shake as a deafening boom filled the air, followed by the sharp crack of wood splintering and glass shattering. The force of the explosion sent Noah and Delmare flying in opposite directions, crashing into the walls. The roar of the blast drowned out everything else, and for a moment Noah's world was filled with a blinding, suffocating heat. Eli screamed as debris rained down from above. Noah's body hit the floor hard, pain shooting through him, but he barely registered it. His thoughts were consumed by one thing: Eli. He had to protect Eli. He had to get to him, but as he pushed himself up from the floor, a sharp pain pierced his chest. He turned toward the boy, his heart pounding in his ears, and saw Eli still crouching in the corner, his arms covering his head. The room around them was a war zone. Dust hung thick in the air, and pieces of the ceiling had collapsed. And then Noah's heart stopped. Bravo, the dog. Noah's eyes scanned the wreckage, his chest tightening in panic. He could hear the low groans of the house settling, the crackling of fire from somewhere in the distance, but there was no sound of Bravo's reassuring bark. Bravo, Noah called out hoarsely, his voice hoarse from the explosion. He pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the sharp pain in his ribs, and staggered toward where the dog had been last seen. It wasn't until he reached the door frame that he saw Bravo lying motionless, his body half hidden beneath the wreckage of a fallen beam. Blood was seeping from a gash in the dog's side, and his breathing was shallow, ragged. "No, no, no." Noah breathed, his heart pounding as he rushed to Bravo's side. The dog's amber eyes flickered open, his body trembling but still alive, still with him. Bravo's tail thumped weakly against the floor, a silent but reassuring sign that his spirit was unbroken. Noah gently ran his hand along the dog's side, trying to assess the damage. "You're going to be okay, buddy. You've always been there for me. Now it's my turn." Eli's voice broke through the haze of fear and smoke. "Is Bravo okay?" The boy's face was pale, streaked with dirt, his hands still shaking from the shock. "He's alive," Noah said firmly, his voice thick with emotion. "We're going to get him patched up, Eli, don't worry." But there was no time to waste. The house was collapsing around them. The explosion had done more damage than Noah had realized. The walls were cracking, and the ceiling above them groaned ominously as if it would give way at any moment. Noah carefully lifted Bravo into his arms, wincing as the dog whimpered in pain, but he didn't let go. "Come on, buddy, let's get out of here." He turned to Eli, whose face was still locked in fear but now held a faint glimmer of hope. "Stay close, Eli. We need to get out now." With Bravo in his arms, Noah grabbed Eli's hand and began moving toward the stairs. The structure of the house seemed to tremble with every step, and the smell of smoke and burning wood filled the air. The explosion had triggered something far worse was coming, and Noah knew they had no time to waste. The room was crumbling. The walls were shaking. The exit was only a few feet away, but the danger was far from over. They had to move faster. They had to get out of the house before it was too late. Noah stumbled through the wreckage, holding Bravo close, the dog's breathing labored but steady. The smell of smoke and burning wood still lingered in the air, but the worst of the chaos seemed to have passed. The house groaned, its foundations cracking, but Noah didn't have time to think about the building. His focus was on getting out, on keeping Eli safe, and on making sure Bravo survived. The stairs creaked beneath their feet as they made their way down, Eli trailing behind, his small hand tightly gripping Noah's. The boy was quiet, his face pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. It had all happened so fast, the explosion, the chaos, the fear. But as they reached the front door, the outside world felt like a brief moment of relief, even though the air was sharp with the bite of winter. They were safe for now. Noah lowered Bravo gently to the ground as soon as they were outside. The dog whimpered in pain, his side bleeding from the gash he'd sustained during the explosion. Noah's heart clenched as he carefully checked Bravo's injuries. The dog's breathing was steady, but the blood loss was concerning. "You're a tough one, Bravo," Noah murmured, running his hand over the dog's fur. "We're going to get you patched up. Just hold on, buddy." Eli, standing next to them, watched silently. His eyes had lost the wide-eyed fear that had gripped him earlier, but now there was something else, something fragile, a mix of exhaustion and the beginnings of trust. The terror of the explosion, the uncertainty of Delmare's threats, it was all still fresh in his mind, but the warmth of Noah's presence, the steadiness of his actions was starting to make a difference. Noah stood and turned to the boy, his voice soft but firm. "Eli, let's get inside the car. We'll drive to the station and get you both checked out, okay?" Eli nodded, but he didn't speak. He simply followed Noah, walking beside him with a quiet determination. As they reached the car, Eli hesitated for a moment, looking back at the house. The old building stood in ruins behind them, a symbol of all the darkness that had haunted him for so long. But now, with Bravo by his side and Noah guiding him, the fear seemed to melt away piece by piece. Inside the car, Noah carefully placed Bravo in the back seat, making sure the dog was as comfortable as possible, though the injury was serious. He then slid into the front seat, starting the engine. The warmth of the car enveloped them, a stark contrast to the cold, harsh reality of the explosion they had just survived. Noah glanced at Eli in the rearview mirror. The boy had curled up in the back seat, his head resting against the window, eyes closed, but his face was softer now. There was still a guardedness there, a lingering doubt that he hadn't fully let go of the pain he'd lived with for so long. But Noah could see the small changes, the subtle shifts in the boy's demeanor. "I'll keep you safe, Eli." Noah said, his voice quiet but filled with sincerity. "I promise." Eli didn't answer, but his eyes met Noah's in the mirror. For the first time, there was a flicker of something. Trust, maybe. A tiny spark that told Noah they were moving in the right direction. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it was one they would walk together. The drive to the station was quiet, the only sound being the soft hum of the engine and the rhythmic tapping of Eli's fingers against the window. The boy was still lost in his thoughts, his face pressed to the glass as the world outside blurred by. Bravo, though clearly exhausted, remained alert, his amber eyes flickering to Noah every now and then, as if checking that everything was all right. The dog's loyalty was unwavering even in the face of his own injuries. Noah's mind raced as he drove. The explosion, the injuries, the evidence they had uncovered. It was all leading them toward one undeniable truth: Delmare had to be stopped. But Noah knew that the real work was just beginning. He had to make sure Delmare didn't slip through the cracks, that justice was served for Eli and his mother Amanda. Arriving at the station, Noah parked the car and turned off the engine. He let out a deep breath, steadying himself. He wasn't just a police officer now. He was Eli's protector. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders as he glanced over at the boy in the back seat. "Stay here, Eli," Noah said, his voice soft but firm. "I'm going to make sure they get everything they need from us." Eli nodded without a word, his gaze still fixed on the window. Noah stepped out of the car and opened the back door to help Bravo out. The dog was moving slower now, his injury taking its toll, but he still walked with pride beside Noah as they entered the station. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but professional. Deputy Marcus Beale, who had worked with Noah for years, met him at the door. Granger Marcus said, his eyes scanning Bravo's injured form. What the hell happened? Noah quickly explained the situation, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside. He recounted the explosion, Delmare's frantic actions, and the documents they had found. We need to find him, Marcus, Noah said, his tone serious. Delmare is a dangerous man. He's already slipped away once, and I have a feeling he won't stop until he's covered his tracks completely. Marcus nodded grimly, pulling out his notebook. I'll get the team on it. We've got his name and some solid evidence now. Let's make sure he doesn't slip away again. Noah leaned against the desk, watching as Marcus made a call to start searching for Delmare. The man's face twisted in frustration as he listened to the information being relayed to him over the phone. There's a chance he could be heading for the border, Marcus muttered after hanging up. We've got some units patrolling the main roads. We'll catch him. Noah's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden movement. Eli, who had entered the room quietly, was standing just behind him. The boy had followed him inside, his eyes wide and filled with uncertainty. His gaze flickered from Noah to Bravo, then back to the officers moving around the station. Eli, Noah said, kneeling to his level. You're safe here. We'll take care of this. Eli looked up at him, a flicker of something passing through his eyes. Will he come back for me? He asked, his voice small and full of fear. Noah's heart ached for the boy. He had already been through so much. Witnessing his mother's death, running for his life, and now facing the man who had done it all. I won't let him hurt you again, Noah promised, his voice firm with conviction. As the conversation moved on, Noah began relaying the details to the other officers. They were quick to begin gathering all the information they could. Delmare's known whereabouts, his associates, and any other piece of evidence that might lead them to him. But Noah knew it wasn't going to be easy. Delmare was good at hiding. He had proven that much by disappearing after the explosion. The courtroom was packed with a heavy silence as the case against Ellis Delmare began. The walls seemed to close in around Eli as he sat at the witness stand, his small hands clenched tightly in his lap. It wasn't the first time Eli had been in a room full of people. He'd seen them before, but never like this. Never with so much at stake. Noah sat in the front row, his gaze never leaving Eli. The boy had come a long way from the frightened child who had crawled out of the attic. He wasn't the same boy anymore, not entirely. But the events of the past few days, the explosion, the discovery of the truth, it had all been too much for Eli to process. The weight of it was visible in his tired eyes, his shoulders slightly hunched like he was carrying a burden too heavy for his frame. Eli, the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named Travis Penner, said gently, I know this is hard, but you're here to help us understand what happened. Can you tell the court what you saw the night your mother died? Eli's throat tightened, and he took a deep breath before looking up. His eyes met Noah's across the room, seeking comfort in the officer's steady presence. With a small nod, Eli began to speak, his voice quiet but clear, filling the silence of the courtroom. I was upstairs, Eli began, his words coming slowly like they had to fight their way to the surface. I heard them fighting. Mom, she didn't want to stay. She said she was done. She wanted to leave him, but he didn't want her to go. He was yelling about money, about the insurance. He kept saying things like, we need this, we can't leave it all behind. And then she fell. Eli's voice broke slightly, but he pushed through, his eyes now focused on the floor. He said it was an accident, but it wasn't. The room was dead quiet, and Eli could feel all eyes on him, but he didn't look up. He was still too scared, too haunted by the memories of that night. Yet Noah could see it, the quiet strength building within Eli as he shared his truth. He pushed her, Eli continued, his voice steadying with each word. I saw it. She didn't get back up. I tried to help her, but I couldn't. Noah clenched his fists, fighting the rage that bubbled up at the thought of what Delmare had done. But he focused on Eli, offering him a small, reassuring smile. This was Eli's moment. He needed to feel safe, to feel like his voice mattered. The prosecutor paused before continuing, his voice soft. And what did you do after that? Eli swallowed hard, his eyes flickering briefly to Bravo, who was lying quietly at Noah's feet, his presence a quiet reassurance. I ran. I didn't want him to hurt me too. I thought maybe if I hid, I'd be safe. The weight of Eli's words seemed to hang in the air, the courtroom collectively holding its breath. The prosecutor turned to the judge, then to the jury, before addressing the court again. "We have a witness who can corroborate Eli's testimony," Travis said, turning to Noah, who stood and made his way to the stand. The officers had gathered a strong case. Photos, audio recordings, the forged insurance documents from machine. All of it painted a clear picture of Delmare's guilt. But Noah's testimony would be the final piece to put everything together. Noah's voice was calm as he spoke, but his words were firm and unwavering. "I found the evidence in the house. Photos, insurance papers, and the recordings. Delmare had been lying to his wife, to everyone. He had no intention of ever letting her leave. And when she wanted out, when she tried to protect her son, he killed her." The prosecutor nodded, then turned to the jury. "We know now that Delmare had a history of manipulation, deceit, and violence. His actions led to the death of Amanda Collins, and they threatened the safety of her son, Eli. But thanks to Eli's courage, the truth is finally coming to light." Eli, though still clearly shaken, lifted his head slightly, as if the weight of the truth had begun to lift. His eyes flickered toward the back of the room where Delmare was seated, shackled and pale. The man's eyes met Eli's for a brief moment, and something flickered in Delmare's gaze. Something dark and angry, like a man who knew his fate was sealed. The tension in the room thickened. It was clear. This wasn't just a case of one man's crime. This was the moment where the entire truth would come out. Noah looked at Eli, who was still sitting silently, but now there was something different in his posture. The fear hadn't disappeared, but there was a flicker of something new, something hopeful. For the first time, Eli wasn't just hiding from his past. He was standing up to it. The courtroom was quieter now, but Eli's heart still raced, his thoughts swirling as he sat back down beside Noah. The adrenaline of the trial was fading, but the weight of his past was still pressing heavily on his chest. He had told the truth. The room had heard it, and Delmare had been exposed. Yet Eli still couldn't shake the gnawing fear inside of him. The fear of what would come next, of what Delmare might still do, even behind bars. Eli glanced at Bravo, who was lying at Noah's feet, the dog's calm presence offering a small comfort amidst the chaos. Bravo, ever loyal, raised his head and locked eyes with Eli. The dog's amber eyes were warm and steady, as though saying, "You're safe now." The bond between the two was undeniable, stronger than ever before. Eli reached down, hesitating for a moment before rubbing the dog's ears gently. Bravo's tail thumped softly against the floor, and Eli smiled for the first time that day. The simple act of touch of connection was enough to ease some of the tension that had built up in his small body. Bravo had been there when he needed him most, first as a protector and now as a quiet friend, the only one who seemed to truly understand. "You're not alone, Eli," Noah said, his voice soft but filled with assurance. "We're going to get through this. You and Bravo are a team now. No one's ever going to hurt you again." Eli didn't respond at first. He just kept petting Bravo, the gentle rhythm of his hand on the dog's fur, grounding him in a way that words couldn't. But Noah saw it. The way the boy's shoulders seemed to relax, the way his face softened, even if only slightly. Eli wasn't the same boy who had crawled out of the attic in fear. He was beginning to change, to grow stronger. It was as if Bravo's unwavering loyalty was the catalyst for that transformation. The bond between Eli and Bravo was more than just companionship. It was a lifeline. Eli had spent so many years hiding, running from his past, terrified of what awaited him. But with Bravo by his side and Noah standing behind him, the boy could finally face the future with a sense of security, even if it was fragile. As they left the courtroom later that day, Noah could feel the tension still lingering in Eli's small frame, the uncertainty that would take time to work through. Eli was still a boy after all, just 8 years old, and the world had been a dark and unforgiving place for him for too long. But the way he stood next to Bravo, the way the dog walked close by his side, told Noah that Eli had found something solid in the midst of all the chaos, something real, something he could trust. Bravo nudged Eli's hand, and the boy looked down at the dog, his lips curving into a hesitant smile. "Thanks, buddy," Eli whispered, his voice barely audible. Noah watched as Bravo gave Eli a slow, understanding glance. The dog's loyalty wasn't just to Noah, it was to Eli too. In that moment, Noah understood just how deep the bond between the boy and the dog had become. It wasn't just about protection anymore. It was about healing, about trust, and about a future that for the first time felt within reach. As they made their way out of the courthouse, Noah placed his hand gently on Eli's shoulder. "We've got a lot to do, Eli," he said, his voice warm. "But we're in this together." The boy nodded, and with Bravo beside him, he walked confidently step by step into the future, no longer alone, but with a family, a team, and a promise of protection. Noah and Bravo trekked through the dense forest, the path narrow and barely visible beneath the blanket of snow. The cold air bit at their skin, but Noah was used to it. It had been hours since they left the courthouse, and the trail they were following had led them to a secluded area far outside of town. "Stay close," Bravo, Noah muttered, adjusting his jacket as he trudged forward. The dog, always alert, trotted just behind him, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air for any signs of danger. Noah had received a tip about a cabin in the woods, one that Delmare had been using as a hideout. It was old, forgotten by most, but Noah had a hunch that it was more than just a refuge. It was a place where Delmare had hidden more than just himself. It was where he had buried the evidence of his crimes. The cabin came into view, slowly emerging from behind a cluster of tall pine trees. It was small, dilapidated, and looked like it hadn't been lived in for years. The roof sagged in places, and the wood was weathered, turning gray with age. But there was something about it that made Noah's gut twist. He could feel it in his bones, the feeling that they were about to uncover something that would change everything. "Here we are," Noah said quietly, his breath fogging in the cold air. Bravo's tail flicked as he glanced at Noah as if saying, "I'm ready." Noah pushed the door open, and it creaked on its hinges, protesting the intrusion. Inside the cabin was dark and musty, the smell of damp wood and decay heavy in the air. But despite its desolation, there were signs of life. Footprints in the dust, furniture covered with tarps, and an old fireplace in the corner blackened from years of use. Noah began his search methodically. He moved from room to room, checking every corner, every crevice. Bravo stayed close, sniffing at the walls and floorboards as though he knew exactly what they were looking for. The dog's eyes darted around, scanning the area with the precision of a trained K9. It didn't take long before Bravo's nose led him to a loose floorboard in the back of the cabin. The dog's body tensed as he pawed at it, his tail wagging in a low, steady rhythm. Noah crouched down, his hand reaching for the edge of the board. It came up with ease, revealing a small compartment beneath. "No way," Noah murmured, pulling the hidden box from the ground. Inside there were several folders and files, each one filled with papers. As he flipped through them, his heart sank. They were insurance documents, more than he could count. But these weren't just any documents. They were forged papers, falsified claims, and altered signatures. Delmare had been running a complex fraud operation using fake identities to collect insurance money for years. The pages were littered with the same name, Amanda Collins. But these weren't the same forms Noah had found in the house. These documents were even more detailed, with photos, medical records, and personal information all manipulated to fit Delmare's lies. Noah's hands trembled as he sifted through the files, piecing together the scope of the operation. Delmare had been running this for so long, and Amanda's death had been just another piece in his scheme. A scheme that had gone unnoticed by everyone, until now. Bravo let out a soft whine, bringing Noah's attention back to the present. The dog was staring intently at a small piece of paper wedged at the bottom of the box. Noah pulled it out carefully. It was a photograph, old and faded, but clear enough to make out the image of Amanda, holding Eli in her arms, her face smiling gently. The back of the photo was handwritten, "For Eli, always protect him." Noah swallowed hard, the weight of the photo sinking deep into his chest. It was a message, a final request from a mother who had known the danger she was in. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Amanda had known Delmare's true nature, and she had tried to protect her son right up until the end. Noah placed the photograph gently back into the box, his resolve hardening. The truth was there buried in these files, and now it was his job to make sure Delmare faced justice. He couldn't let the man get away with it any longer. Bravo stood by Noah's side, his steady gaze watching the officer as if saying, "We've got this." Noah stood up, taking one last look at the box and its contents. There was no more time to waste. Delmare was out there, and the clock was ticking. They had what they needed to bring him down. It was time to finish what they had started. Noah's hands gripped the steering wheel of the patrol car as he drove back toward the station. The files in the back seat, evidence of Delmare's twisted schemes, felt heavy with the weight of truth. Amanda had left a trail, and it was up to Noah to make sure it led to justice. The photo of her holding Eli burned in his mind. "Always protect him," she had written. As he drove, his thoughts raced. The evidence was irrefutable. Delmare had been running a web of lies, insurance fraud, and manipulation for years. But what troubled Noah the most was the thought of what Delmare might do next. He had already proven he would do anything to keep his secrets hidden. And now, with the walls closing in on him, Noah knew Delmare would fight back. He wasn't done yet. "Stay close." "Bravo," Noah murmured, his voice a mix of resolve and worry. The dog was quietly seated in the back, eyes alert and ears pricked. Noah could feel the tension mounting inside him. Delmare wouldn't go down easily. The man had proven to be a master of deception, and Noah had no illusions about how far he'd go to escape justice. When Noah arrived at the station, he immediately went to work. The files from the cabin were spread out across his desk, the pieces of the puzzle coming together in front of him. He called in a few trusted officers to help with the investigation. The focus was clear: find Delmare before he could flee and make sure every shred of evidence was documented and preserved. But even as the officers worked, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that Delmare was already one step ahead. The man had a head start, and now it was a race against time. After hours of gathering intel, a break finally came. Delmare's last known location had been traced to a remote cabin up north. It was where he had hidden his crimes, where he thought he could escape the law. It wasn't much of a lead, but it was enough to go on. Noah's heart pounded as he stood up from his desk, determination flooding through him. He grabbed his jacket and motioned for Bravo. "Let's go, boy. It's time to finish this." As they reached the outskirts of the forest, the cabin came into view once more. Solitary, isolated, and cold. This was it. Delmare was here hiding just like the coward he was. But Noah wasn't here to play games. He had everything he needed to take Delmare down. The only question now was how to approach him without making the same mistakes he had before. Noah stepped forward, Bravo at his side, as they moved cautiously toward the cabin. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the snow. There was no noise except for the crunch of their footsteps. And then, just as they reached the door, they heard it, the unmistakable sound of movement from inside. Delmare was there. The man was waiting, perhaps expecting Noah to come for him. The air was thick with tension. Noah knocked once on the door, the sound echoing in the quiet forest. "Delmare," he called, his voice steady but loud enough to carry through the wood. "We know what you've done. It's over. Come out with your hands up." Inside, there was silence, followed by a faint shuffle. Noah's hand instinctively went to his gun, his eyes scanning the cabin's surroundings. Bravo growled low, sensing the impending danger. They were ready. The door creaked open, and there he stood, Delmare, looking worn and wild, his face pale, his eyes flashing with a mixture of fear and fury. He had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. "You've got nowhere to go, Delmare," Noah said, his voice unwavering. But Delmare didn't back down. Instead, his lips curled into a twisted smile. "You think this is the end?" Delmare sneered. "You're wrong, Granger. It's just beginning." Before Noah could react, Delmare lunged his hand, reaching into his jacket. But Bravo was faster. With a snarl, the German shepherd darted forward, sinking his teeth into Delmare's arm, pinning him to the ground. The man's scream filled the air as he struggled beneath Bravo's grip, but there was no escape now. Noah moved quickly, securing Delmare with handcuffs, his heart pounding from the rush of adrenaline. Bravo stood by, unwavering in his loyalty, the dog's eyes still locked on Delmare, making sure the man stayed down. "No more lies, Delmare," Noah said, his voice a firm declaration. "You're going to pay for everything." As the officers arrived to take Delmare into custody, Noah allowed himself a moment of relief. The chase was over. The investigation had reached its turning point, but the battle was far from over. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the cabin as Delmare struggled beneath Bravo's unyielding grip. But despite the officer's swift capture, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Delmare was a man used to escaping a man who had spent his life manipulating situations to his advantage. The fact that they had him now didn't mean he was out of tricks. "Noah, you better get him to the car quickly," Marcus Beale, one of the deputies, warned as he approached with a group of officers. "Delmare won't stay down for long. He's got more connections than we thought." Noah nodded, his jaw clenched. "I know, he'll fight this. He'll do whatever it takes to get away. We need to get him out of here before he tries to run." Bravo, standing steadfast beside Noah, didn't relax his posture. His amber eyes still trained on Delmare, who glared up at them from the ground. The dog's body remained tense, a silent reminder of the stakes involved in this arrest. Delmare wasn't just some petty criminal. He was dangerous, and this wasn't over yet. As the officers began to escort Delmare toward the patrol car, Noah stayed close, watching the man's every move. Delmare's expression remained cold, his face a mask of defiance. "You think you've won?" Granger Delmare sneered. His voice was low, filled with contempt, but there was a flicker of something more, something desperate. "You haven't seen the last of me. I'll get out of this. I always do." Delmare had a history of slipping through the cracks, but Noah had spent enough time in law enforcement to know when a man was bluffing. Delmare's bravado was thin, and Noah was certain that the man knew his time was running out. But just as they reached the edge of the woods, Delmare suddenly broke free from the officer's grip. He twisted violently, throwing one of the deputies off him, and bolted toward the trees. His footsteps were quick and panicked, but Noah was ready. Bravo reacted instantly. "Bravo, no!" Noah barked, but Bravo was already in motion, his powerful legs propelling him forward with lightning speed. Delmare had no chance. The German Shepherd reached him in seconds, knocking him to the ground with a force that sent the man sprawling into the snow. "No, get off me!" Delmare screamed, trying to shove Bravo off, but the dog had already sunk his teeth into the man's jacket, keeping him pinned to the cold ground. Noah rushed forward, grabbing Delmare by the arm and forcing him to the ground again. "You're done," Noah said, his voice cold with authority. "You can run all you want, but you're not getting away this time." Delmare's chest heaved with frustration, his face red with anger. "You think this is over? You think you've won," he hissed. "I'll be out before you know it. You can't hold me forever. I'll make sure of it." "No, Delmare," Noah replied, his voice unwavering. "This time you're not going anywhere. You've taken too much from too many people. Your game is up." As Delmare was forced into the patrol car, Noah took a deep breath. They had him. But something inside Noah told him that Delmare wouldn't go down without a fight. The man had connections, and Noah knew that Delmare wasn't going to just sit in prison quietly. He would do whatever it took to escape, and that meant they had to be ready for anything. Bravo stood beside Noah, the dog's gaze never leaving Delmare as the man was driven away. Noah patted Bravo's head, his heart still racing. "Good boy," he said softly, his voice full of gratitude. "We've got this." But even as Noah spoke the words, he knew the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The days following Delmare's arrest felt like a blur to Eli. The initial rush of relief from seeing his father behind bars quickly gave way to an overwhelming tide of emotions. At first, there was the quiet peace that came with knowing Delmare could no longer hurt him, but it didn't last long. Eli found himself staring at the empty walls of the room where he had spent so many years hiding from his father's wrath. The silence was deafening. The house felt too big, too quiet, even with Bravo by his side. Eli would curl up next to the dog at night, his small body seeking comfort in the warmth of Bravo's fur. But even then, sleep didn't come easily. The memories, images of the fights of his mother's lifeless body, of running away into the cold night, still haunted him. The mornings were the hardest. Eli would wake up with his heart pounding, his mind racing with images of the past. It was as if he could still feel the weight of his father's anger, the suffocating fear that had held him captive for so long. Noah could see it too. The way Eli's face would become distant whenever the house grew too quiet, the way his eyes would flicker with pain whenever someone mentioned his mother. The boy hadn't had time to process everything. How could he, after all that had happened? The trauma was deep, and it wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. One evening, after a particularly long and silent day, Noah found Eli sitting alone in the living room staring out the window. The sky outside was dark, the stars barely visible through the cloud cover. Bravo sat beside Eli, his head resting on the boy's lap. Noah sat down across from him, watching as Eli ran his fingers through Bravo's fur. He could see the boy's gaze was empty, lost somewhere in the past. "I'm sorry," Noah said softly, his voice gentle but filled with concern. "I know it's not easy. You've been through more than anyone should have to." Eli didn't respond right away. His hands trembled slightly as he stroked Bravo's coat, his eyes still fixed on the window. It was as if he couldn't find the words to express what he was feeling, and Noah didn't push him. He knew it would take time. "I don't know how to forget," Eli finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to stop feeling like he's still here." Noah's heart ached at the words. He didn't have an easy answer, but he knew one thing for sure. Eli wasn't alone anymore. He didn't have to carry the burden of his past by himself. "You don't have to forget, Eli." Noah said, his voice firm but kind. "You just have to know that it's over. You're not going back to him, and you're not alone. I'm here. Bravo's here. We're a family now." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Eli's shoulders seemed to relax ever so slightly. The boy's hand paused, and Bravo shifted his head to look up at Eli as if to say, "You're safe now." Eli's eyes met Noah's, a flicker of something, perhaps hope, shining through the pain. Do you think she'd be proud of me?" Eli asked, his voice fragile. Noah's gaze softened, his heart swelling with emotion. "I think your mom would be so proud of you, Eli." Noah said, his voice thick with feeling. "She wanted you to be safe, to be happy, and I'm going to make sure you are." Eli blinked, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. He didn't say anything more, but in that moment Noah saw a shift. It wasn't a complete healing, it couldn't be, but it was the first step. Eli was starting to believe that he could have a future, one where he wasn't defined by the pain of his past. Bravo, sensing the change, gave a small whine and nudged Eli's hand with his nose, as if reassuring the boy once more that he was not alone. Eli smiled faintly, the first real smile Noah had seen from him in days. It wasn't a cure, but it was progress. Noah stood, walking toward the door. "Come on, Eli, let's get some rest. Tomorrow's another day, and we've got a lot ahead of us." Eli nodded slowly, his hand resting on Bravo's head. For the first time in what felt like forever, he stood up without hesitation. "Yeah, tomorrow." Noah watched the boy and the dog walk toward the stairs, the bond between them stronger than ever. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Noah knew one thing: they were no longer fighting this battle alone. The courtroom was packed with people, their murmurs filling the air, but all eyes were on the witness stand. Eli sat there, his small frame perched on the high chair, his hands nervously clutching the edge of the podium. His once bright eyes, filled with fear, were now quieter, steadier. He had been through so much, but today was different. Today he was standing up for the truth, for his mother, for himself, and for the future he deserved. Noah stood at the back of the room, his eyes never leaving Eli. He knew this was going to be hard for the boy. He could see it in the slight tremble of Eli's hands and the way he kept glancing at the floor, but he also knew it was necessary. This was the moment where Eli's voice would be heard. And in that voice, Noah could sense the weight of all the years Eli had suffered in silence. The prosecutor, a tall, sharp man named Travis Penner, addressed the court. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to hear is not just the testimony of a child, but the truth of a family torn apart by violence. This young boy, Eli, has endured more than most adults could bear. Today, he will tell you what happened in that house, the truth that his father tried so desperately to bury. Eli took a deep breath and looked up, his gaze steady now, even if the fear still lingered in his eyes. He glanced at Noah one last time, and Noah gave him a small nod, a reassurance that he was here, that he was safe. That was all Eli needed to find his voice. "Eli," Travis asked gently, his voice full of empathy, "can you tell the court what happened the night your mother died?" The room fell silent as Eli's voice filled the space. "My dad, he didn't want her to leave. She was going to leave him. She told him she couldn't live with him anymore, but he wouldn't let her. He pushed her." Eli's voice faltered slightly, but he continued, his words unwavering. "She fell and didn't get up. I didn't know what to do. I thought she'd be okay. But she wasn't." Noah's chest tightened as he listened to the boy's words. Each one felt like a weight that had been carried too long. But it was Eli's truth, his testimony, and it was powerful. Eli paused for a moment, swallowing the lump in his throat before he continued. "After she fell, he told me she had an accident. But I saw it. I saw him push her. He killed her." The courtroom was dead silent. Noah could feel the room holding its collective breath as the truth came out. Eli's voice was steady now, filled with the strength of someone who had carried a terrible burden and was finally letting it go. "I ran away," Eli added quietly, his eyes now focused on the floor. "I didn't want him to hurt me too. So I hid. I stayed in the woods. I didn't know where to go." As Eli finished his testimony, Noah could see the toll it had taken on the boy. His small frame seemed to shrink under the weight of it all, but there was something else in his eyes now, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. For the first time, Eli had taken control of his story. The prosecutor stood, his eyes briefly scanning the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've heard the testimony. You've seen the evidence. Ellis Delmare is guilty of murder, and he is guilty of tormenting his son for years. Today we seek justice for Eli." Noah watched the jury as they deliberated. He could see the wheels turning in their minds, the weight of Eli's words sinking in. It wasn't just about legal proceedings anymore, it was about something deeper. It was about right and wrong, about giving a voice to the voiceless. Minutes later, the jury returned, and the verdict was read aloud. "We, the jury, find the defendant Ellis Delmare guilty of second-degree murder, child endangerment, and insurance fraud." A wave of relief washed over Noah as he turned to Eli. The boy's face was still strained, but there was a faint glimmer of something new, something that hadn't been there before. It was as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief and solemn acknowledgement. Delmare, his face pale, stared at the floor as the verdict was read. There was no more room for his lies. He was finally going to face the consequences of his actions. Eli sat quietly, the tears he had been holding back now starting to fall. But these weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of release, of freedom. For the first time, Eli had been able to speak the truth, and the world had listened. As the court adjourned, Noah walked over to Eli, kneeling beside him. "You did it, Eli," Noah said softly. "You helped us put an end to all of this. You're free now." Eli nodded his head, resting against Noah's shoulder, the weight of the past slowly starting to fade. The final paperwork had been signed. The judge had approved it. Eli was officially Noah's son. Noah sat at the kitchen table, a small stack of legal documents in front of him. His hands rested on the papers, but his eyes were on Eli, who was sitting on the couch, his legs curled beneath him. Eli was looking out the window, his gaze distant. It had been weeks since the trial, but the boy still hadn't fully embraced his new reality. Noah understood. He had witnessed the depths of Eli's trauma, the years of fear and uncertainty that had kept him locked in the past. But now Eli was safe. They were safe. Bravo lay beside the boy, his head resting on Eli's lap as the dog's steady presence seemed to reassure him. The German shepherd's warm body pressed close to Eli's side, the bond between them stronger than ever. Bravo had been there for Eli when no one else was, and now he was still here providing the same unwavering protection. Noah watched quietly, his heart full of both pride and sadness. He knew this was the beginning of a new chapter for Eli, but he also knew the boy needed time to adjust. The trauma wouldn't just disappear overnight. It would take time and it would take patience. But Noah was ready for that. He had made a promise to Eli and to himself. They were family now, and nothing would ever change that. "Eli," Noah said softly, breaking the silence. "You know, you're my son now, right? That means no matter what, we're in this together. You've got a family, a home. You don't have to worry anymore." Eli turned slowly, his eyes meeting Noah's. There was still some hesitation in his gaze, but it was less than before. Slowly he nodded. "Thanks," Eli whispered. His voice was small, but there was a glimmer of hope in it that hadn't been there before. "For everything." Noah smiled, his heart swelling. "You don't need to thank me. You're part of this family now. We're going to make sure you're safe. No more hiding." Eli's eyes flickered to Bravo, who wagged his tail slightly, the dog's soft gaze warm and full of understanding. Eli gently scratched Bravo behind the ears, the dog responding with a small thump of his tail against the floor. "You've always been there, huh?" Eli said, his voice full of wonder as he looked at Bravo. "Even when I didn't know I needed you." Bravo gave a quiet bark and nudged Eli's hand with his nose as if to say, "I've always been here, and I'll always be here." Noah chuckled softly. His eyes filled with affection for both Eli and Bravo. "Yeah, he's always been here, and now we've got a home, a real one. A place where we don't have to worry anymore." The weight that had been pressing on Noah's chest for so long, the weight of uncertainty, of wondering if he was doing enough for Eli, began to lift. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was doing something right. He was building a future for Eli, for both of them, and that felt like the most important thing in the world. That night, after a quiet dinner of takeout pizza, something simple but comforting, Noah sat down with Eli at the kitchen table. The dog lay at their feet, content. Outside, the wind had picked up, but inside, the warmth of the house, the warmth of their new life together, felt like a shield against everything they had been through. "Tomorrow," Noah said, breaking the silence, "I was thinking we could spend the day fixing up the backyard, maybe plant something together." "What do you think?" Eli looked at him for a moment, then nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Yeah, that sounds nice." For the first time since Noah had met him, Eli's smile didn't feel forced. It was real. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Bravo lifted his head and wagged his tail as if sensing the change in the air. The dog's loyalty, unwavering as ever, was a constant reminder of the love and protection that had always been there for Eli. And now, for the first time in a long time, Eli had the chance to truly embrace it. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft, golden light over the backyard as Noah stepped outside, ready for the day. He had spent the morning gathering some tools, preparing the space for a small garden, and a sense of excitement bubbled inside him. This was their first real project together, something simple but meaningful, a way to start building their new life. Eli had been up early too. Noah smiled as he looked over at the boy who was standing by the garden shed waiting for instructions. There was something new in Eli's eyes today, something lighter, like the burden of the past was finally starting to ease. His shoulders were no longer hunched with the weight of fear. Instead, he stood taller, his face filled with a quiet sense of peace. Noah walked over and handed him a small trowel. "All right, Eli, let's get to work. What do you think we should plant first?" Eli took the tool with a slight smile. "Maybe some flowers," he said after a moment, looking around the yard. "Something bright, like sunshine." Noah chuckled, nodding in agreement. "Sounds good to me. Let's make this place as bright as we can." Together they knelt down, digging small holes in the soft earth, planting bright marigolds and cheerful daisies in neat rows. Bravo lay beside them, content in the sunlight, occasionally wagging his tail when Eli paused to give him a scratch behind the ears. There was no rush, just the steady rhythm of their work and the warmth of the sun on their backs. For the first time in a long while, Eli seemed to forget about the fear that had once clung to him like a shadow. As they worked side by side, Noah noticed the small but significant changes in Eli. The boy was smiling more, his movements becoming more confident. When he looked up at the house, it wasn't with fear or doubt anymore. It was with a sense of belonging, a sense of home. For the first time, Noah truly believed that Eli was starting to see this house for what it was, a place of safety, a place of love. By midday, they had planted a small garden of marigolds, daisies, and a few lavender bushes, their colors already brightening the yard. Noah sat back on his heels, wiping his forehead with his sleeve, and looked over at Eli. The boy was still working diligently, his hands covered in soil, but his face was full of contentment. Bravo had moved to a shaded spot under the tree, curling up for a nap, but he kept an eye on the two of them, ever vigilant, ever loyal. Eli looked up, a wide grin spreading across his face. "This is nice," he said, his voice light, the kind of tone Noah had never heard from him before. "It sure is," Noah agreed, his heart swelling with pride. "We're making something good here, Eli." And in that moment, Noah realized something deep inside him. It wasn't just about the house or the garden or even the work they had done together. It was about what they had built in each other, a bond that was stronger than anything they had been through. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were living. They were creating a new future together. As the day wore on, Eli and Bravo took a break, and Noah sat on the porch watching as the boy ran across the yard, his legs kicking up the soft grass. There was joy in Eli's eyes, a joy that had been buried for far too long. For the first time, he was running free, unburdened by the past. Noah smiled as he watched Eli, his heart full of love and hope for the future. He had kept his promise. Eli was safe. He was happy. And together they were building a new family, a family bound not by blood, but by love and loyalty. Family isn't about what you have in your blood, Noah murmured softly to himself, watching Eli run with Bravo. It's about what you share in your heart. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the garden, Noah knew that this moment of peace, of joy, was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The storm of the past was behind them, and ahead of them lay a future full of possibility. Together, they were home. In a world often filled with challenges and uncertainty, the story of Eli, Noah, and Bravo highlights the transformative power of love, loyalty, and second chances. Through the unwavering support of a dog, a German shepherd, who stood by his side, Eli was able to overcome the deep scars left by his past. Bravo, with his unconditional loyalty, didn't just protect Eli physically. He helped heal the boy emotionally, offering him a sense of safety and belonging he had never known before. The story also brings to light the profound bond between humans and animals, particularly the unique connection between a dog and its owner. German shepherds, known for their intelligence, bravery, and steadfast loyalty, have long been our protectors and companions. They don't just serve us. They teach us about loyalty, unconditional love, and the importance of standing by those we care about, even in the darkest of times. Through their journey, Eli discovered that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people and beings who stand by you when it matters most. The love and protection Noah and Bravo offered Eli became the foundation of his new life, where hope began to replace fear, and the future held endless possibilities. This story is a reminder that love, whether between humans or animals, has the power to heal, transform, and create a life filled with joy, hope, and peace. It's about finding strength in each other, embracing the loyalty and love that animals like German shepherds offer, and understanding that together we can overcome anything.